Thousands of people are converging in the forests of southwestern Vancouver Island, taking a stand for this. Ancient forests. There's less than 3% of productive original forests remaining in British Columbia, and the Ferry Creek watershed on unceded Pachidot territory is the last intact, unprotected old-growth valley remaining on southern Vancouver Island.
Our chief invites us all to this land.
Under the invitation of Pachidot elder Bill Jones, and alongside Indigenous leadership, the grassroots organization Rainforest Flying Squad has been blocking road building and logging in Ferry Creek for nearly a year. This predominantly Indigenous and women-centered movement has expanded to block old-growth logging in nearby regions, including Edinburgh Mountain, Central Walbran, and the Kaikous Valley on unceded Dididat territory. In the spring, an injunction was granted to remove the camps, and enforcement started. To this date, RCMP have arrested more than 500 people for standing in the way of old-growth logging. What's shaping up to be one of the largest acts of civil disobedience in Canadian history is unfolding at this very moment.
My ancestral name, I'm still learning how to say it because I am a survivor of the Sixties Scoop and was never ever given an Indian name until about maybe about 5 years ago, so like around 2015. I was told that, because I'm a very strong person, a very strong woman, that one of the names that they would give me was Klasom Satlt'xw Losah, from the Tla'amin Nation, from where my mother is from. Those words mean strong women rose. That naming is kind of like a reflection of how my relatives see me as a very strong woman who, has been speaking up for injustice issues since I was 15, so that's 50 years.
So the theme of this event is called the Heart of the Feminine. When I say those words, the heart of the feminine, what comes to your awareness?
Right away I'm thinking, well, what is feminine? Like, how do we define it? In which language? And are we talking about, the heart of the feminine of, a woman? Or are we talking about the heart of the feminine as a man? Or are we talking about, the heart in a feminine perspective of a two-spirited person? Or are we talking Indigenous, because the word feminine has many different meanings from many different cultures. And so I look deep into my heart and I'm like, who am I? Which side of me is going to speak today to answer this question? Because we all have that feminine part in each and every one of us. And so the heart is a language that a lot of us don't really listen to, but we should listen to it because the heart really doesn't misguide us. So I say I'm a proud two-spirited person, and people are like, oh, or I can say I'm a proud two-spirited, multi-spirited person because I grew up in a white world with this lovely DNA. I understand both male and female sides to my life, and I reach into that. I reach into that pot of, the spirit, and it keeps getting fuller and fuller because I'm going more into like, who am I? And I'm starting to like who I am. But there was a time in my life that I didn't like who I was because society told me I was bad, I was evil. Society told me I was an unwanted child. And I began to believe that for a long time until a few years ago, and people started telling me, you've survived. You have made it through the most atrocious parts of being Indigenous, and you're loved. And I'm like, pretty soon I rejected that love. But then after a while, I'm like, I'm tired of rejecting it. I want it. And so I learned that I'm okay. If I start loving myself, I'm going to be okay.
I'd be curious to hear what role your feminine spirit plays in your life right now.
What role the feminine role plays in my life now, is that over the years, my life has delivered me in many different journeys that have taken me all around the world and back. And I've learned about medicine wheels, and I've learned about my connection to the land. Over the years, I've developed my skills as a human rights advocate, speaking up about injustice and delivering solutions at the same time. And in the past, maybe 3 or 4 years, as I learned more about the medicine wheel, I began to see the connection between human rights and the climate change. And I've learned more quickly about, when I'm talking about the medicine wheel in a context of relationships, grandfather, son, father, sky, Mother Earth, our brothers, the trees, the sisters, our wind. Always seeing it in a relationship and seeing the strengths that we gain from having these relationships. And I see it as a positive movement once we understand how we're all connected. Grandmother Moon, when I talk about Grandmother Moon, when we're, feeling the energy shifting and everything, it's like, oh, wow, the moon's going to a full moon. Grandmother Moon is shifting things. She's changing the energy because she is in sync with Mother Earth. And when Mother Earth is off balance, the rest of the world is off. And so I looked at what my relationship is to this, and reaching way back into my DNA and understanding where my people from the Tla'amin Nation are coming from. They talk about, the Salish Sea. They talk about, the salmon that carry our DNA. They make references to every aspect of the land. These are stories that I think I must have heard when I was just an infant, because these were not stories that I heard when I was in school. So I'm like, oh, okay, so this is where I belong. And now where I'm having a deeper understanding is about educating people in a different way, different from my grandmother and my great-grandmother, because they would tell us in stories about, the spirit bears, about the salmon, about, the thunderbirds and different things like this. Well, they always told us in person. But because I was removed from that element, and I grew up in a different time, and I'm still growing up. I'm 63 years old and still saying I'm still growing up. I'm still learning about my relationship. And it's like, I'm using different tools now. Using different tools to shape a better tomorrow. In hopes that, the next generation won't have to go through the same trauma that we've had to go through. So, that's my paternal side, my mothering side. And so when I'm, embracing this new role as an elder, as a matriarch, people have started calling me grandma. In the white man's world, I'm not legally a grandmother, but in the Indigenous world, because I'm sharing my knowledge, my experience, and the skills on how I got here, it's like everybody on the front lines is saying, this is Grandma Osa, and she is, one that we need to listen to, because she's not going to let us get hurt. And she has rippling ways of making things right. In regards to my role at Ferry Creek, which is the shared territory between the Pachidat and the Dididat people of Vancouver Island, it's been over a year now since I had learned about the territorial issues that were coming to the surface around what was going to happen to the land. In June of 2020, one of the elders, Bill Jones, spoke out about he's had enough, that the land is to be protected, and the reasons why he said that the land needed to be protected is that it is the old growth. It's less than 3% of the entire ecosystem for Vancouver Island. Less than 3% of the old growth is happening right there. And there's one tiny piece, he said, is where the watershed is for Ferry Creek. And so with that watershed needing to be protected, he put a call out. He put a call out to all his friends on his social media and in his phone book and said, there's a big issue happening here. This is what is happening. Companies like Teal Jones has moved in and they want to clear cut the old growth. And he said, he's 82 years old. He said, I can no longer make it up that mountain. And you could hear it in his voice and his heart that he could no longer walk up the mountain on his own. But he said, there's some trees up there that are over 3,000 years old. They have to be protected. And so on August the 9th, 2020, the first tent went up at Ferry Creek. We've had well over 5,000 people come and go from the creek to protect the ancient trees. We're non-violent. We're meeting the opposition with nothing but love in our hearts. And we're not going to go there with any drugs or alcohol in our system. You're going to warrior up. This is really a part of the teachings of the Rainbow Warriors, the Rainbow Nation. The rainbow, for me, is people coming together from many different lives, many different nationalities. So sometimes when I do the medicine wheel teachings, I ask people where you're from. And they usually tell me Quebec, Toronto, Vancouver. And then I'm like, no, stop. I want to know where you're from. What brings you today? And people then really have to think about it. They have to go into their heart and really think. Whereas our Indigenous youth, they'll say, I am, Gitsan. I'm from the Haida. I'm the Eagle Clan. Tla'amin, Seashell. And they're really proud when I ask them where they're from. And most of them are like, I know where I'm from. I just don't know my language. And I said, that's okay. Neither do I. But I know where I'm from. And so, it's fostering that relationship with, white people, Indigenous youth, young and old. That's my role as a person who shares a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of TLC, and just keep it in balance.
What role does the feminine spirit play on the front line?
The role of the feminine spirit on the front lines is really strong. It doesn't take a lot of women to be on that front line, because our energy is we're like solid, but we're also very like dainty too. Anybody but grandma is dainty, okay? I'm like, because we're like, we can be very strong and soft at the same time. And so some of the people that were following the patriarch system are now understanding that in a lot of different blockades, a lot of different wars, it's always been women that have been on the front lines. Like the Mohawks were famous for sending their warrior women to the front and being in that warrior stance. But it was also always the women who were on the front lines when the men went to war, and they came back and they found the women had moved in to their jobs. And the women, we hold so much power. Like, I give a little bit of history when we're talking about the rights of women to be able to vote. It was 5 women that overturned that ruling back in the 30s. And when we think about Idle No More, when we're pushing for the rights for, decent housing and for running water and to protect our women and to protect our children, 5 women. When I joined the Idle No More movement, we went from, those 5 women to 36 hours later, we had over 40 million people joining this movement worldwide. That is the power of women. One of my wishes for the next generation in their relationship for the feminine spirit is that they welcome it. They get more in tune with their feminine side and understand where it's coming from, and that they have good role models to follow, and to trust it. That's a big issue that I keep hearing over and over again. Is like, how do I know I'm doing the right thing? How do I know it's taking me down the right path? And I mean, if you don't come up with scraped knees or a bruise, then you're doing okay. So, I just wish that, we just learn, and that, that the next generation learns to reach out to the elders, to the people who are doing the trailblazing, and walk with us.
How do you nourish your feminine spirit?
How do I nourish my feminine spirit is, I'm very, I'm very loving and accepting of all people, of all nationalities, all different walks of life. But then when it comes to the closeness to who I am, I'm learning to do a little bit of self-care now, to say it's okay to take me time. It's okay for me to wear perfume like I did earlier today. It's okay for me to be around people that are also on the same journey, that are also sharing and looking after themselves, and they don't always need me to pamper them. So, loving and accepting myself one day at a time, one moment at a time, I'm okay. I hope that we can use this as a platform to prepare people for what is to come, and that it's done in a soft, gentle way to remember our siklia, our heart, that it's us that looks after us, but together We can do that. Betsama. Act as one by sharing one story, one song, share some bannock, share some food, come together. There we go.